Do you want to save time? Do you like being prepared? And do you hate homework? Well, in that case, listen closely. Hi friends, and welcome to today's chapter of our quest. So I went to the University of Zurich, and now I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in English, literature, and linguistics. And let me tell you, I've never read as much as I did during my studies. Which is great, right? I mean, as a reader, I should have been excited to get to read so much for school. And I mean, I was, but it was a lot, and I really wished that I had read at least some of these books before, just to reduce the workload. So let me help you with that, and let me recommend to you 5 books that I personally think you should read before studying English to A, save yourself some time, and B, get to brag to your fellow students about not having to do the homework. Alright, so let's dive right in and let's start strong. And yes, I'm sorry, we are starting with Hamlet by William Shakespeare. So this play starts with the information that the King of Denmark is dead. In fact, he's been murdered, and he tells his son to avenge him. So basically, the king's son, called Hamlet, is supposed to kill the new king, his uncle, because his dead father tells him that his uncle has murdered him, and again he wants Hamlet to avenge him. But since this is not an easy task, the play basically revolves around Hamlet's hesitation and his philosophizing about life and death and trying to come to a decision when it comes to whether or not he should actually murder his uncle. And meanwhile, we also learn about his uncle's plans to kill Hamlet first. But why am I telling you to read this specific book before studying English? Well, it's a simple reason really, because you will 100% have to read at least one of William Shakespeare's works, probably more, but at least one, and I am fairly certain that it might be Hamlet, because it is, next to Romeo and Juliet, the most well-known of William Shakespeare's works, and it's, in my opinion, also the most complicated, the most complex one, but also the most rewarding once you've read it and analyzed it. And so I think it might very well be the play that you will have to read during your studies. And so I just say get it out of the way, get it over with, read it before starting your studies so that you can save yourself some time. But please don't misunderstand me when I say get it over with, because I actually like this play very much and it's very interesting to discuss in class, especially if you're interested in topics like the overall structure of a drama and the meaning of life and death, and also the potential of gaining immortality due to A, your actions, and B, the stories that might, after your death, be told about you. But I say get it over with because, as you can see, it is a rather long play, it is a thick book, and you will need a lot of time to get through it because it's also quite, again, complex, complicated. We know that Shakespeare's English isn't the easiest one to read, right, and to understand, but I think in Hamlet, it kind of reached its peak when it comes to how difficult it is for us today to understand. But at the same time, I think it's really rewarding once you do get through the book, once you do understand, because again, the topics, the themes are so important and so interesting to discuss later on in class. And so yeah, it is a book that you will need a long time to get through, but it is a rewarding experience. And by the way, another thing that might be difficult for some people when it comes to getting through this book is it doesn't really have that much plot. As I said before, the plot mostly revolves around Hamlet's hesitation and his uncle's plans to try and kill him first. And so it's more based on like excruciatingly long inner monologues than it is on dialogue and actual like action and plot. But again, that's also what makes this book so interesting and valuable to analyze and discuss. So again, to reiterate, my recommendation here is that read it before studying English in order to save yourself a lot of time and energy during the semester, but also in order to get familiar with Shakespeare's kind of writing style. And again, it is probably his most complicated work. So if you've already read this one, if you've understood this one, if you've managed to get through this, all the other ones will be like a walk in the park, a piece of cake. And also, please read it because I am almost 100% certain that you will have to at some point anyway. Alright, let's continue with the second book that I would recommend you read before studying English, namely the Book of Genesis. And I unfortunately don't have a physical copy of this one, so I'll just put a picture of it on the screen for you. Okay, so I think I won't have to summarize this one, right? It is the genesis of the world. We have Adam and Eve's story and also the snake's story, and we talk about or learn about the fall of mankind. And the reason for why I think you should read this one before studying English has to do with the fact that I am an atheist, and so I've never read the Bible, and I honestly don't really plan on doing so. But during my studies, I wished I had at least read this part of it, because certain topics and themes and events just pop up time and time again in other books of the English literature, right? And so I just wished I had read the Book of Genesis, so I would have been able to better understand the other books that we were reading. So for example, while discussing Milton's Paradise Lost in class, I would have greatly profited from having read the original story and thus having something to compare Paradise Lost to. And again, Paradise Lost is one of these books that I am almost 100% certain you will have to read at least parts of during your studies. And so if you don't know the Book of Genesis and this whole story, it might prove a little difficult for you to understand Paradise Lost in its entirety and to be able to compare it to the original text. So yeah, I think you will profit from reading the Book of Genesis first. And as I said before, a lot of English literature, well actually Western literature in general, is somewhat based on the Bible. And also both literary and critical theory as well as philosophical texts are also often based on the Bible, especially on this kind of basic dichotomy of good versus evil and the fall of mankind. That kind of generated the idea of this dichotomy in the first place and originates in the Book of Genesis. So again, a lot of literature, literary texts, critical texts, and also philosophical theories will be so much easier for you to understand, interpret, and work with if you at least know the Book of Genesis. Alright, time for the third book, which is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. And I've already talked about this in my top 10 books of all time video because I really like this one and it kind of changed my life. So I'll just give you a brief summary and then explain why you should read this before studying English. So, we follow an English sailor who gets stranded on a deserted island and manages to survive there for almost 30 years. And he's called Robinson Crusoe, and he's just an ordinary man, but he manages to survive in extraordinary circumstances. And during his time on the island, he struggles a lot with his Puritan faith. He's always kind of caught in between giving up and thinking that God has deserted him, but then switching again and believing that no, everything is happening for a reason and God is still looking out for me. And so that basically constitutes the heart of the plot of Robinson Crusoe. So again, why should you read this one before studying English? Well, basically, since this novel is often considered to be the first English novel, among others, there are other opinions out there, but this one shows up time and time again when we're talking about the first English novel. I am fairly certain, again, that you will have to read this at some point during your studies, and again, just get it over with and do it beforehand to save yourself some time. Because while it may not appear to be a long book, I mean, it's 240 something pages this edition, you will need some time to get through it. Not because it's really complicated, or at least I didn't think so. It's not a complicated, flowery, or complex writing style, I don't think. But again, there is not all that much plot or action because, as I said before, we are mainly following Robinson Crusoe's thought processes because it's written in the first person, right? We have a first person narrator and we are basically within Robinson's head, and we get to witness his struggle with his faith and his sometimes desperate attempt at surviving. And so, yeah, we see him build a life for himself on this deserted island, but it's not really action-packed. There aren't any attacks or thunderstorms or whatever, or at least not for the most part. And so yeah, that's the reason why I think you might need some time to get through this, because you need to motivate yourself time and time again to continue reading. But similarly to what I told you about Hamlet, it is again a very rewarding experience to read Robinson Crusoe. And by the way, the first person narration is also one of the positives when it comes to my opinion about this book, because yes, sometimes you will hate Robinson Crusoe because he can be really annoying and you might want to throw the book across the room. Don't do it, but you might want to. So yeah, while this is definitely the case sometimes, the first person narration also allows you to really read this book as kind of an autobiography, right? You are within his story, within his head. And since you are within his head, this book also kind of allows you to really closely follow his character development firsthand. And as you already know, I am a character-driven reader, and so this book is pretty much perfect for me because it is about the character. That's the whole plot, the character development of Robinson Crusoe. And also, another thing that is really interesting about this book is that it will teach you a lot about the Puritan faith, their values, and their worldview. So in other words, it will teach you about a quintessential part of English history and also of English literature. So again, my recommendation is A, read it to save yourself some time because you will almost certainly have to read it for your studies anyway. And B, read it while you have enough time to truly appreciate the writing style and think about the topics that are discussed in here without having to rush through it because you have so many other things on your plate. Okay, let's continue with something that is kind of in a similar vein as Robinson Crusoe, namely Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. In this book, we follow Lemuel Gulliver, a ship's surgeon, on his 4 different voyages. And during these 4 voyages, he gets to visit 4 different countries, and he also meets very interesting species and thereby gets to know their customs and their worldviews. So I recommend you read this one back to back with Robinson Crusoe because they are quite similar, at least when it comes to the time they are set in, the sea voyages, the character development, and also the first person narration. But why do I think you need to read this one before studying English? Well, again, I am quite sure that you will at some point have to read a satire because it's a rather important genre in the English literature. And in my opinion, Gulliver's Travels is the best satire there is in English literature. At least it's the best one I ever read. And here comes another reason why you should read it back to back with Robinson Crusoe. So Gulliver's Travels is a political satire on human nature, society, and here it especially deals with the state of the European government in the 18th century. And it's also a satire on the imaginary traveler's tales, like, for example, Robinson Crusoe, that were very popular around the time it came out. And if we briefly want to compare Robinson and Gulliver, I would say that Robinson is, again, an ordinary man who manages to survive in extraordinary circumstances. So he's kind of a hero or a miracle, while Gulliver is also an ordinary man, but he kind of stumbles from one established and working society into the next one without actually learning anything that he could bring back home and kind of teach his own people, his own society. And so I wouldn't say that he's a hero or a miracle. It's kind of the opposite, right? He finds all of these amazing societies that work better than his own society back home, but he fails to learn anything. And so yeah, that's kind of the contrast that there is between Robinson Crusoe and Gulliver's Travels. So read Gulliver's Travels right after having read Robinson Crusoe to be able to compare the two, and also to prepare yourself for the 18th century part of your studies. So again, my recommendation for this one is read it right after Robinson Crusoe, so you will be able to compare the two, and so your knowledge about Robinson Crusoe is still fresh in your mind. But also read this one because you will almost certainly have to read a satire during your studies, and this one is the most extensive and best written one that I personally know. Alright, so for the last book on this list, let's move on to the 19th century with Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So in this book, we follow the Bennet family, and this family includes 5 drastically different sisters. So we have the eldest, the sweet and modest Jane. We have our heroine, our protagonist, Elizabeth, who is the intelligent and somewhat rebellious one. And then we have the bookish and rather plain Mary, and also Lydia and Kitty, and these last 2 ones are the 2 youngest, and they are rather immature. But again, as I said, Elizabeth is our heroine, she is our protagonist, and we mainly follow her as she is trying to navigate society's expectations of her as a young woman who is supposed to marry and settle down with a husband who can provide for her, while she's also dealing with a seemingly arrogant and very proud Mr. Darcy. So now for the reason why I think you should read this one before studying English. So I am sure, almost certain, again, that you will have to read either Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen or Jane Eyre by Emily Brontë. If you're very unlucky, you might have to read both, but if you can choose, then I would always recommend Pride and Prejudice over Jane Eyre. It's just objectively the better book. Sorry, not sorry. I know that's my opinion, but I could go on and on about why I don't like Jane Eyre, but why I like Pride and Prejudice, and I won't do that. This would be a whole other video, and if you want to see me do that, then please comment below and tell me, and I will definitely do that for you. But yeah, we don't really have time for that right now. So let's just continue on with why you should read it before studying English. Okay, so yes, I'm almost certain that you will have to read either this one or Jane Eyre, and then again, I would choose this one. But also, Pride and Prejudice is one of the quintessential 19th century novels because it introduces you to the conventional views of 19th century society when it comes to wealth and rank, especially from a woman's point of view. And also, it addresses an even more commonplace and kind of general topic because it skillfully uses irony to comment on the somewhat funny flaws of human behavior and human nature whenever the complications of love enter the game and our lives. And because of these topics that I just mentioned, this book will give you a glimpse into 19th century society and thus prepare you for this part of your studies. So my recommendation again is to read this to hopefully avoid having to read Jane Eyre. Read this to be able to understand and discuss English 19th century society, and also again read this one to save yourself some time during the semester. So there you have the 5 books that I strongly recommend you read before studying English. But of course, there are so many more books that I could have put on this list, and I am also sure that the syllabus is vastly different depending on the university that you're attending. So please, if you have any recommendations of books that you think people should read before they study English, then drop your answers in the comments below and let's help each other out. Let's make sure that our future students don't drown in books. Even though that might actually be a nice death. No, let's just make sure they don't, okay? And also please like this video and comment down below if you want me to make another one of these recommendation videos, because again, I have so many more books that I could tell you to read before studying English. Next week, I will upload another routine video, namely my June reading wrap-up. So again, if that's something you're interested in, then please make sure to click on that subscribe button and also activate the bell so you won't miss it. And I'll see you soon for the next chapter of our quest. Bye friends, have a great day and take care.